Hi everyone, welcome back to Mastering Change. Today we're going to dive deep into how we think about trauma, mental health and healing.
And not just from a psychological angle, because while therapy and emotional support matter, they're just one piece of the puzzle. What if our bodies, and even the environments we live in, are just as important when it comes to healing?
Our guest today is Leo Pruimboom. He's a clinical psychoneuroimmunologist and a pioneer in integrative medicine. And he's here to help us connect the dots between our biology, our brains, and our sense of belonging.
We talk about everything from the roots of suicidal ideation to the power of community, and why modern life may be making us sick in more ways than one. But don't worry, it's not all doom and gloom. Leo also shares how we can begin to reclaim our health by reconnecting with nature, with others, and with ourselves.
This conversation is expansive, empowering, and honestly eye-opening. If you ever felt like the traditional approaches to mental health are missing something, this one's for you. Let's get into it. Leo Pruimboom, it's my pleasure to welcome you to the podcast today. Thank you for joining us.
I like it, yes. Thank you very much.
Welcome. So, as most of our audience will now already know, we start all of these podcasts with a little card game, which is called Where Should We Begin? And on each of these cards, there's a kind of prompt. And the idea is that the prompt will lead into some form of longer, maybe story about yourself. So I'm going to just pull the top card off. I picked a few cards out of the deck and I'll pull the top card off and let you answer it. The card says, my greatest power struggle is with ...
With my wife. She's too intelligent. So I'm always competing with her because she's a brilliant person. And everything we do it together. So the way we developed clinical psychoneuroimmunology, we did it out together. And that stroll brought us to publish just a few weeks ago a very good chapter about clinical P&I in a Nature book about psychoneuroimmunology. And that's what we do, clinical psychoneuroimmunology.
How do you balance that professional and personal context? How do you make sure that boundaries between work and life are difficult enough, regardless of them kind of putting in that piece that you're both in both spaces?
But my best friend, Tom Fox, he has a relationship. He's working with me. We are traveling very much. And we have one big purpose. We want that clinical P&I to be the basic discipline of all medical and paramedical disciplines. Because it's time that we stop thinking about psychosomatic diseases. Everything is somatic. So we cannot think about psychology and physiology anymore as two separated things. It's exactly the same thing. And that's also for families. If you look to people with different purposes, they very often diverge in life, and 20 years later, they separate because they don't know each other anymore. With us, we have the same purpose. We want two things. We want 4 kids to be raised and leave them a legacy, and we want to be clinical psychoneuroimmunology, the basic discipline of all medical and paramedical disciplines.
That's a nice take on it, actually. The shared purpose, nurturing shared purpose in a professional and a personal context. Great. Excellent. Well, if you wouldn't mind now just saying your name and introducing yourself at a very high level, and then we'll go into how you relate to the field that we commentate on.
Okay. So I'm Leo Pruimboom. I studied medical physiology and biochemistry. I also studied physiotherapy and socioanthropology. And I did my PhD at the University of Groningen in the medical faculty in clinical psychoneuroimmunology and evolutionary medicine. I'm a writer of 6 books. I have 45 publications which are indexed in PubMed. And I have an institute which that educates clinical psychoneuroimmunology in 16 different countries, with 16 different universities. And so 35 years later, I started 35 years ago, 36 years ago now. We started with clinical psychoneuroimmunology. We obviously, in the beginning, we only had a lot of obstacles to to run over, but today we are known and accepted, full science. We're not alternative. We are, but what we do accept is we have hard science, but we also use soft skills. So, and that is something which is very important to add.
So I think that's a really nice place for us to start is, first of all, in your words, can you describe to us what clinical psychoneuroimmunology is? Because I'm sure, like me, I've got I can break that down and make sense of the parts, but it would be really good to understand a kind of holistic overview of how you describe that to somebody who maybe works in a field that it's relevant that they need and they should understand it, but perhaps hasn't come across it yet.
If a patient asks me what I do, I always say I practice modern medicine. And then they asked, what do you mean with modern medicine? And then I said, that's complete medicine. And then they said, what is complete medicine? And then I said, to recover health, we have to go back to the future. And that literally means that it's about time that what we did in medicine is cut everything in little pieces. When I was 17 years old, I read a paper and that spoke about systems. So I didn't understand that we have a cardiovascular system, a neurological system, an endocrinological system, a gastrointestinal system, because I thought, but there is also blood in the gut. So that cardiovascular system is in the gut, so in the end, we made some subjective thing, which is called specialisms. But the reality is that everything is everywhere at the same time. And clinical psychoneuroimmunology is about the two big organs, let's call them organs, that are responsible for the fact that we prevail. That's the brain and the immune system. But they communicate constantly all over the place. I don't know if you know, but in the cranium, we shouldn't talk about the brain anymore as a brain. We should talk about the cranium, in which the immune system and the brain, they live together and they communicate constantly in the cranium, but also in whatever part of the body. And for that communication, those big organs use a huge connectome. That connectome is neurology, but it's also endocrinology. It's also cytokinology, but it are also extracellular vesicles. So what we really do is connect all those islands, which we developed in a subjective way, and make it one big continent again.
And how do you mentioned your clients there, your patients? When somebody presents to you, what's your typical presentation? How do people find you? And then what's the pathway? How do you then go about practicing clinical psychoneuroimmunology?
One of the most important meta models we use is from the photo to the film meta model. Look, if you look to people suffering from an autoimmune disease or from a cardiovascular disease, it's very interesting that people think that the symptom somebody presents is also exactly related to the damage the person suffers. I'm going to. So, for instance, if somebody has multiple sclerosis, yeah, and you call that an autoimmune disease, then the photo, if I would then look into the brain of a person with multiple sclerosis, and that's what we do, yeah, then what we should find is human structures that are attacked by our own immune system. Okay, but if I really look into the brain and make a photo of it on a microbiological level, we are not attacking ourselves. If you look to the structure of the brain has completely changed structurally in people suffering multiple sclerosis. So that means it's not an autoimmune disease, it's an immune disease. The immune system has found weird and foreign structures that are attacked. And if you understand that, then the disease is already a different disease. It's not the same disease anymore, because those structures can be regenerated to normal human structures. Now,
Can,
so
can I try and understand that? Because I need to break that down as well. So if you have multiple sclerosis, which you were saying is an autoimmune disease at first, so your immune system is attacking the brain structures, and then the brain structures are reforming into something different, and then you've got a different disease, which is right.
No. What I said is that we say that multiple sclerosis is an autoimmune disease. It's not an autoimmune disease, because if you look at the structure that is attacked by our immune system, that structure has changed completely. Yeah, what you see sugar molecules from mammals. You see lectins from plants, yeah, and they really are incorporated in the brain of a human being. So the immune system is not attacking your own body, it's attacking something foreign. So you should not call it an autoimmune disease.
That's it. So there are no autoimmune diseases then.
It is an immune disease.
Immune disease.
And that's caused by an agitator, something that the immune system is recognizing as an agitator in the body.
As a foreign, and if you look at the structure at micro level, it is not a human brain. So the system is not making a mistake. The immune system is attacking something which should not be in the brain. That's the photo. And that photo developed by a film. And so because if that structure is so different than normal, there is a timeline. Yeah, a timeline and things happened. And those things that happened changed the brain structure. That's a photo film thing. So the first thing I always do with a patient presents symptoms. The first thing we always do is, are the symptoms that a person feels, are they correct? I don't know if you ever heard of a thing which is called a symptom perception disorder.
Okay.
Mm.
I haven't heard about that, no.
Right. We know that. But the thing is that we sense our body and we sense the environment in a part of the brain which is called the insular cortex. That insular cortex is completely atrophic, for instance, in people suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome. Okay, so they feel incredibly tired, but they do not have a lack of energy. They are completely fatigued, or they have pain. There's no damage. So what that means that they feel symptoms that do not correspond with their problem. And that's why we always start with, is the people capable of sensing the body and the environment in the right way? If not, the symptom literally fools the therapist, the medical doctor. Yeah. And that's happening very often. If you look at cardiovascular diseases, if you look to cancer, if you look to mental diseases, yeah, a lot of people suffer depression, but they don't even know where it comes from. And so they suffer things, but what they suffer is not their problem. That's why we always say the symptom is the symptom and the problem is the problem.
And how do you draw that distinction between the two in clinical practice? Like, how do you understand because I understand from integrative medicine and is root cause analysis, looking at all of the different kind of pillars that make up that. How do you go about when someone's presenting and saying, their symptom presentation, how do you establish whether that is, if that symptom is a consequence of
several tests to see if people can discriminate between different triggers. Yeah. So if somebody is not capable of sensing the right way, if something is in her body, you can use, for instance, a 2-finger test. So those 2 fingers, they are 1 centimeter from each other, and people with closed eyes, you ask them, how many fingers do you feel? 1 or 2? Okay. If your symptom perception is okay, you can perfectly feel the difference between 2 and 1 finger. If your symptom perception has suffered a disorder, which means insular cortex atrophy, you make a lot of mistakes. You said, oh no, yeah, I feel 1.
Does anyone with ME then or chronic fatigue have a symptom perception disorder?
Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting. And I've got a question then as well about these what you're terming immune disorders rather than autoimmune disorders. The way we look at them, because in my family, for example, my grandmother had rheumatoid arthritis, my mum has Graves' disease, my uncle has chronic fatigue or ME, I have Hashimoto's, my cousin killed himself, so that's something, and my sister has diabetes type 1. So it's just like a whole family of immune disorders or autoimmune disorders. Is it a familial thing? Is it a genetic thing? Is it epigenetic?
May I ask you a counter question?
Go for it, yeah.
I think that's interesting, what we're talking about. For you, what does a gene mean?
It's how my body is made up, of the DNA that my body is made up, and how it created me, I guess. I don't know whether that's a very bad answer.
So, a gene is the only thing it is. It's a code for a protein.
Okay, yeah.
That's it. And so does a gene has a purpose, and genes have agency?
Do genes have agency? Well,
interesting question, eh?
I think I'm trying to think about Lego now. I'm just going into my lab from going into.
What I really ask you is, are genes responsible for our behavior, or is genetic expression dependent of our behavior?
Both, I think.
The genes can't do anything.
No.
They are just another organ. So if you don't do anything, there's not one gene active. Now you make them active by your behavior. You make them act. It are organs. It's an organ. It's not our blueprint. We are the blueprint of life. An organism is responsible for genetic expression. And the genetic genes, they don't make behavior. We have behavior, and that behavior activates genes. So genes are not the blueprint of life. Genes, the program. And we always think that the only important genes are the coding genes. But we have at least 37,000 non-coding genes. And you know what they do? Those are responsible for the production of new proteins. But those proteins are produced by our behavior.
Okay. So that still, though, then doesn't explain in any way, shape, or form the link between all of my family having immune issues, other than my family behave badly.
Oh no, it does. You know why? I'm going to explain you why.
Yeah.
Have you heard of pre-play and replay activity of the brain and pre-play and replay activity of the medulla?
No.
If a young kid is born, yeah, before it opens his or her eyes, the brain is spontaneously active, and it literally pre-plays future experiences. So can you imagine? You have a certain genetic program, a certain genome. Your parents also have a certain genome. They in their lives activated their genes in a certain way. And if you are born, you are also already spontaneously, by spontaneous brain and medulla electricity, reactivating the same genes.
So that's a genetic. Is that not is that a genetic predisposition then?
Yes.
Because in the field that we really understand, you would talk about intergenerational, trauma, for example, and then there's all that whole question around: are we born with, and again, I'm using really layperson language here, but are we born with that lizard brain, a pattern already in that lizard brain that affects what you're just describing? And then by virtue of our, environment and experiences and community, like that is my understanding of what you're describing, is that you have a genetic predisposition and how you then live, not always in your control, well, never in your control totally as a child, especially not a young child. And then how then you are educated about, your environment, the importance of community, all of the different tools that we attempt to equip ourselves to live well and fully and healthily our lives. Is that, am I on the right lines there, or have I made a...
I just suppose the following thing. I have a kind of a mutation, a kind of genetic different thing. Okay, that mutation could perhaps produce disease. Could, but only when the gene is used. If it's not used, it cannot produce any toxic thing. It has to be activated. Those genes, they do not have spontaneous activity. You understand? You're not going to sit down and say, oh, look, that gene is producing a protein I don't want. No. That gene will only will only be activated if it's needed. So just suppose I need a protein to think. So therefore I need electricity, because it's first always physics, not chemistry. It is first physics, electricity. And then I try to activate the gene. Ooh, but the thing is, it doesn't work. Then I get ill. Then I get ill because I needed the gene for that purpose. And, so I have the purpose, and my genes have to support me. Yeah, that's a...
Yeah. So my question then is, if that's the premise, is that it's somewhat in our gift to control the expression, whether those genes are expressed or not, and whether that's helpful or harmful.
Exactly.
What's the key? Where's the, because I'm fascinated too, because I've got haven't got a long family history, but my mum's got a JAK2 gene mutations, had since 50. She's now 74, and she does lots of integrative, she does a lot, but she's had 5 different cancers, lots of different. And so I'm really fascinated by the idea that if we're equipped with knowledge to understand how to support helpful gene expression and inhibit unhelpful what does that look like? What are you advocating for in that practice? Is it a one size fits all, or does it depend on?
Emma, it's a really good question. Look, if we look to our genetic uptake today, and we compare that with 5,000 years ago, nothing has changed. Nothing. Perhaps 2 genes, but nothing has changed. But it's a completely new world. Okay? In 5,000 years, our genetic uptake will not have changed hardly, but the world will be even more different. Yeah? If you look at us now, today, and when you compare with 5,000 years ago, we are a completely different species. But it is impossible based on genetic differences. That's based on our interaction with our context, with our environment. So your family and Araminda's family is living in a context they're not made for. Literally, where they are not made for. And say you've taken that with you to a modern, industrialized world, in which, for instance, the incredible amount of toxins are not we are not capable of handling that. So we are doing and our genome and our brain, our immune system, is trying to do everything to make new products, literally innovative products, to adapt to an environment which is like Mars. The actual world is not a human world, and it has gone so fast. These changes that we are running behind. But the thing is, we can accelerate this process. Because we have to accelerate. We don't have any choice, because if we wait for mutations to adapt, we need at least 60,000 years.
Yeah.
So what is much more interesting is understand that we have the capability to adapt, but therefore we have to understand that is based on our agency and our purposes.
And is that what you said when you said what we need to do is go back to the future earlier?
Yeah. Go a little bit back to the future. So Emma, you can take nature. You can take a human being out of nature, but you cannot take nature out of a human being. So just look at the following studies. A beautiful study. 120 minutes in a forest per week. Is capable of down-regulating blood pressure with an average of 12 points. We talk about 120 minutes green. That's nothing. So we don't need to become a Neanderthaler anymore. That's not necessary. We have adapted, but we need a little bit of nature to handle modern life. And that's
Yeah, I don't know if you know Helena Hansen and her work on ecological medicine as exactly as you're describing it. And I also find what you're saying very empowering to say it's because there's a lot of kind of emphasis put on like there's you know, what you did or didn't you know, by explaining it in that kind of macro context of it's the environment that you're attempting to thrive in that is not conducive to your genetic predisposition, and then saying, you know, I'd like to talk about what is it, the kind of things that you prescribe in your practice that further empowers people to then take control of as much as they can their environment to support, you know, helpful and prevent unhelpful genetic gene expression.
It's quite, just to jump in, it was very similar to what Gabor talks about in The Myth of Normal, right? In the fact that we're trying to survive as though we are living in a world that's made for humans, but it's not made for humans. As you just said, it's exactly that. It's not possible to thrive.
He's taking less of a biochemical, you know, he's taking more of a psychospiritual lens on that and talking about we don't live in community, we don't you know, our maternal, you know, just everything from the way that we rear children, the food that we eat, the rituals and behaviors. But I think he's talking about a lot less long history than Leo is. I mean,
yeah, but you know, I'm because you talk about psychospirituality. Our group more or less found spirituality, the spiritual location in the brain. Spirituality is not some abstract thing. Spirituality is part of human beings. We we need to belong to something bigger than we are. So just think about the word loneliness. That is the worst case scenario that can produce disease. If you just look at people who suffer chronic loneliness, you look at their brain, you look at their immune system, and you look at to their genetics. So I feel lonely. And what's going to happen, for instance, in the kidney of a lonely person? Because loneliness obviously affects every single organ, and if it affects an organ, it affects organelles. Yeah, and DNA is an organelle. It's a music instrument. Yeah. But it's not a componist. That are we. So if you look to lonely people and you see how their kidney functions, you really think, what the hell is this? How can loneliness affect a visceral organ? It does. It literally is part of possible nephropathy. Yeah. So loneliness is a direct cause of kidney insufficiency. Can you imagine? Yeah. And that's not psychological. That is physiology. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's why I say psychology and physiology, you cannot separate them anymore. There are no psychosomatic diseases. There are only somatic diseases. What you think is physiology, and physiology is what you feel. So there is no such a thing like psychosomatic diseases. There's only soma. And perhaps to add, if I treat, or you told me what do you do with your patients now? First, I want to know the photo and the film. Then I want to know what the real problem is. Yeah, and then we explore 20 domains. Yeah. Not 8, not 4, 20 domains. It goes from eating up to sexing, up to chanting, up to singing, up to drinking, yeah, and everything in between, and the biorhythm, etc. And then and when you then translate that to, for instance, genetic susceptibility, you see, then you see that the majority, and Emma, the majority of pathological expressed genes are related with a deficiency in one or more of those 20 domains. And that's easy to measure because everybody more or less knows how to breathe. But we should not breathe all the air pollution we are breathing. If I was in Mexico City, 8 of 10 kids have asthma. But it's not because of their genes. that's because of air pollution.
Expressing and unhelpful. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay, understood. But
And so you talk about nature as being a way of kind of being a massive help for us as humans. If you have one of these diseases, is there a way to reverse them, or are you kind of too far? Is it, like, for example, the kids in Mexico, just literally removing them from Mexico City where it's to somewhere that's green and less polluted, will that reverse their asthma or not?
Of course. Look, for instance, in oncology, still a lot of oncologists, they say that once you have cancer, it's not important anymore to treat the cause. That is so far away from the truth, but that is a dogma, that's a paradigm. But it still is, if people have lung cancer caused by smoking, then chemo and radiotherapy hardly prolong the life. Stopping smoking doubles lifespan. So it's not true, of course. Getting rid of the cause is very important. So if you take those kids out of the Mexico City and they are going to live on the countryside, they're going to be cured, of course. Of course, because the agitator is gone. And when the agitator is gone, you do not need any inflammatory response anymore. Perhaps you have to help the lung to recover. That's not a thing, because it can be damaged. But in the end, it's the pollution is the cause. Have you ever heard of the study of McDonald's? McDonald's, they were sued in America, and McDonald's wanted to prove that McDonald's food is not a cause of diabetes type 2. So what did they do? They took 1,000 persons and they ate 1 month only McDonald's food. And then what they did is a genetic test. And in those 1,000 people, there were several that really developed pre-diabetes type 2, but they all, of course, then they found a group of genes, which showed susceptibility for diabetes type 2. And they said, you see, it is it's genetics. It is not the McDonald's food, but that is rubbish. If they would have eaten McDonald's food,
the gene would have been expressed.
Type 2 with whatever gene they would have had.
But at that point, I know the thing is, so I know diabetes type 2 can be reversed. So as soon as you stop eating McDonald's every day for a month, then there's very likely that they can they can come out of diabetes type 2. But I guess if we're talking about oncology and cancer some more, it becomes a lot more complicated, doesn't it? It becomes a lot more complex. So, for example, I think that cancer, along with a lot of other diseases, is an inflammatory response to the world, whatever it might be, whether that's stress or your diet or anything that can cause inflammation. But how, like, a friend, again, I'm going to make it personal again, but my dad died last June and he had 7 different cancers. I don't know which one killed him. He survived 18 months with 7 different cancers. But I think he had a very stressful, he was very he was a very high functioning entrepreneur with a very large business and making, a great career and success in that way, but it was probably quite stressful. Although he, you know, he didn't eat particularly badly. He slept well, as far as I'm aware. I think he spent a lot of time in nature because our main home where we lived was in the middle of the green hills of South Wales. So the only thing I can really pinpoint for me would be the stress of like running an extremely big, large corporate business. But he didn't get cancer until literally 18 months after selling that business. So
That's incredibly important what you say now, because after selling his company, what purpose was left? Can you imagine? What was the purpose that was left? I've treated in my life as a non-oncologist more or less 1,700 people with cancer, and there is a very, very, very universal factor in people with cancer. There are only two evolutionary hypotheses for the explanation of cancer, because that's important. If you don't understand cancer with an evolutionary view, it's very difficult to treat cancer today. But cancer has only one purpose, and that is killing the host. There are only three diseases with a purpose, with a killing purpose: aging, amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and cancer. And so it would be I don't know if you it would be so simple at an evolutionary way to prevent cancer. That's a genetic thing, which is found in a naked mole rat. That rat cannot have cancer. Impossible. It's a rat that reaches an age of 30 years, which is incredible. A rat of 30 years. It doesn't age, it doesn't get cancer. And it has one molecule, one protein, and that protein is completely capable of preventing aging and preventing cancer. Why? Yeah. One bloody protein. It's nothing else. It's incredible. How is it possible that evolution did not give that gene to us? Because we have to die. It's a necessity. Yeah, and that's why there are two hypotheses about malign cancer. One, the lack of a purpose in life, which makes sense. And the second one is the soma and the gametes. And we have always thought that spermatozoids and oocytes do not communicate with our body. This is so far away from the truth. Everything we do is transferred to our oocytes and spermatozoids. And the opposite is also true. So can you imagine that when spermatozoids are ill, they're really ill, and oocytes are really ill, that it is better, it's not nice what I say, to get rid of that individual on an evolutionary time scale. And because if that person would continue to reproduce, the probability that the next generation is ill is huge. And for these hypotheses, there is quite strong evidence. If you see the University of Denmark, they do purpose of life training with patients, and there are people with them measuring tumor size. And in 2 hours purpose of life training, they show that mammocarcinoma can decrease the size 50%. It's crazy. It's crazy.
Yeah. But I guess everyone's purpose in life is different too, right? So there's like you've got to figure out what that is for the individual.
What we don't need is to win the Nobel Prize, all of us. But it has to, things have to have a purpose that is very human. Human people who lose themselves, they become addict.
Oh, I was just about to say, so that I was just about to come to this, right? Because I'm an addict in recovery, 15 years of cocaine and crack cocaine. And I thought I knew, I understood that I needed to find a purpose in life. And I thought having a child would be that purpose. Wasn't still in. And the only time when I got into recovery, the thing that made the difference was finding a purpose. And that was this work, the work that I'm doing now. It started off with work with addicted prisoners, but then it developed into what I'm doing now. And I know an absolute hard fact is that is what is sustaining my recovery without a shadow of a doubt.
Definitely. Yep. And what happens literally is that the reward system, the ventral tegmentum, stopped looking for alternative rewards. And that is what I mean, Emma, with the 20 domains. People are searching food, or they are searching micronutrients, or they are searching sex, or they're searching love, whatever it is. But if they don't find it, the reward system that is desensitizes, and that means that in the end, you don't even know what you're searching for, and then the alternative is a drug. Be aware, everybody is susceptible for addiction, but not in nature. You know why? There are no drugs. So the fact that there are drugs now only shows that we are susceptible for addiction. We love. I also love to drink a bottle of wine. You know why? To fly away, and not be conscious of the things that happen. You stand up in the morning. You read the paper with Putin and Trump. You say, "What the hell? I'm going to drink a bottle of wine and forget them." You understand? This completely normal, very logical, very human.
And it's those principles, those 20, because I had a look at your Instagram before this call and I found 16 actually listed out on one of the posts.
But they're not showing.
But maybe there was some, I mean, I had to translate it. So it was called the Big 16, essentials for your patients of the holistic point of view. So it was, but it was the things that you've described, biotransformation, which I'd like to understand a little bit more. The rest are really kind of easy to understand and adhere to. So I know that the science is really deep here, that the principles that I think you're advocating for are intuitive. And what you just talked about then about, I'm caveat, not a clinician or a neuroscientist, but I did listen to a presentation last year that talked about the hypothalamus and how a ketogenic diet can control. But it's everything I hear about this is about how do you control the chemistry, as opposed to how you've talked about it, which is to create the right environment so that the desire, or it's not. It's an interesting. I'm not being very eloquent here, but I guess so much of what I hear in the field, particularly of integrative medicine and preventative health, is still about the kind of, there's a deep root in biochemical and understanding how we kind of, biohacking, I guess, is still very prevalent in that space, isn't it? If we even understand what's happening, how do we kind of hack it, rather than, what you've described, which is a deep historic understanding of the start point of the kind of human condition and presentation, and then the principles by which we encourage or create the environment for positive gene expression, as opposed to, am I synthesizing that appropriately?
Look, but the first, I would like to answer two ways. First, we're always, look, I'm a biochemist, I'm a physiologist, so I know about biology, I know about chemistry, but today I know much more about physics. And we always forget the physics part of organisms. Everything we are doing now is not because we produce a neurotransmitter and then talk. No, 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 no. What we do is we produce electricity, then we produce a neurotransmitter, and then we talk. So it's first physics. And this is so important. So what you're asking is the following. What you're asking is I'm going to answer a little bit different. Yeah, is the following thing. Have you ever heard of the benefit of doing nothing?
Yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. And do you know what happens when you do nothing nothing? Nothing is nothing.
Yeah, you expand, you become open, more open, I think.
What literally happens is that at that moment you have spontaneous activity in your brain. And with that spontaneous activity, you synchronize neurons. Yeah? So we have a huge amount of experiences. That's one big chaos. And when you stop doing things, all those things you have done begin to make sense. Literally make sense. If you look at young children at this moment, their intelligence is decreasing dramatically. And everybody's telling that's because of the electronics. No, it's not about electronics. They could easily play whatever game they need, but they need a few hours of doing nothing. Because otherwise they cannot synchronize everything that they learn. Now, and that's so incredibly important. And can you imagine that if children, why children, before Christmas holiday, yeah, and after Christmas holiday, you measure their intelligence, and after Christmas holiday, their intelligence is 8 points higher. How come? They didn't do anything. Yeah? The brain needs to use the benefit of doing nothing, and Emma, that I think that is what I would add to is that it is not that difficult to recover health. People think that it is very difficult. Integrative medicine, for me, has a failure. It is still conventional thinking using classic therapies. Yeah? And because they use Ayurveda, they use yoga, but not based on a different philosophy. Yeah? And I think it's about time that we forget that we understand that the symptom is the only way the brain has to inform the host that something has to change. We don't have anything else to communicate with. I think that's a very basic part of my work, that we understand what symptoms want to tell us. And if we look at the number of symptoms the brain can produce, and it's horrible, are only 52 symptoms. There are no more symptoms. Yeah? All the so-called symptoms, if you resume them, are 52. And you see that makes medicine so incredibly difficult. Because 5 symptoms can be 20 problems. That's a huge problem. So how to interpret them? Yeah? And please don't treat the symptom, because if you treat the symptom, you cannot communicate anymore. Symptoms is a way. Yeah. And look at little kids, a newborn. I have 4 kids. Yeah. A kid starts crying, so it complains. And then it's hunger. Boom, you give the breast. No, it was alone. You cherish it. What I would love is that my patients would come in crying. Yeah? I give them the breast. And if they stopped crying, it was hunger. And if not, and if not, I take the trousers down, and if they then have peed in the trousers, I clean it up like little kids. Uh, so humans, adult humans, they use words where little kids use tears. But it is
And and I think that is the biggest shift in humanity as well in the last 150 years. We're in our heads so much, the conscious, and that disconnect. I mean, that's talked about a lot, the disconnection to the body. I know, for me, that is a profound insight in my own lived experience, but I do see that being we try and process and understand and make sense of and rationalize and prevent. I mean, yeah, yeah, that really resonates with me and makes complete sense.
And that's what I mean. And that's why so incredible amount of people literally suffer from a symptom perception syndrome. And then you go to the doctor and you get something. But it doesn't go away because the symptom and the treatment, they are not coherent. And that's a huge problem.
And then you treat the symptom, you mask the presentation, your body's being ignored, and everything then gets expressed in an unfavorable pattern. That makes a lot of sense to me. I'm going to ask you the question that we ask all of our podcast guests. I think this is one of those days where I think I've got I think I might know your answer, but here we go. So you referenced the kind of world that we're living in today, whether you look at the macro context, the geopolitical landscape, the climatic situation, you name it, there's plenty to focus and fear about at that macro level. Then you come down to society, the deconstruct of like communities, and then you come back to like immediate spheres of influence, family, colleagues, significant other, children, and then our relationships with ourselves. There's a lot of disconnection, there's a lot of angst, fear, doubt that prevails in this world that we are living in. If there was a single lever for change, one button you could push that would be the catalyst to the change that we need to see, what would that be?
A thing which is called deep learning. Make people conscient that the actual polarization of the whole world is based on a virus. And COVID-19, and the polarizations it produced was only one step beyond what already was happening. The polarization is about dirt, it's about pathogen. If we look at 1919, in which the Spanish flu preceded the Spanish dictatorship, the Italian dictatorship, and the German dictatorship. Pathogens cause germophobes. Putin is a germaphobe, Trump is a germaphobe, Hitler is a germaphobe, and a lot of us are germaphobes. Yeah? And we are our so-called cognitive immune system is so incredible activated, that we see devils all over the place. So there is nothing else to do than don't give people more information, give them knowledge. Yeah. And that's a different thing than information. That's the only way to change the world is show that there is still wisdom in the world, which can be supported by real knowledge. I think that would be my answer to your question.
Okay, I just need to ask more now. I know I can't finish on that. I need to ask more about that. Sorry.
I knew you were going to go. That's fine. Keep going.
Hang on. 1919 was the Spanish flu, and that preceded the First World War and the Spanish and Italian dictatorship and obviously then Hitler afterwards. And so, and you use the word germaphobe. Why does that make why germaphobe?
I mean, that's so interesting. If you see the work of Paul Sack worldwide, there has been studied the trust of a population in its government. And what has been done was a multivariable analysis, and see if it was food or whatever. The only thing what comes out is pathogenic load. Pathogenic load. That's the only thing what comes out. Yeah. And if you see the study, it makes sense. We have a thing which is called a cognitive immune system. Yeah. So we are one of the animals, some monkeys also, that do not have only a reactive immune system, but a proactive immune system. And if you look at to evolutionary causes of death, then the first cause of death is infection. And so humans are always trying to sense the presence of pathogens. And that's why we reject the unknown. That's called a neophobia. Somebody has never seen a dark colored person. It's very normal that you reject that person because you don't know his or hers customs. I went to China 40 years ago, and the people touched me like I was some foreign person from another planet. That's normal. And pathogens are the worst case scenario. If you look to the American elections, the last ones, and you look to the states that were normally Democratic and are now Republican, just measure that are the states that suffered the highest number of COVID-19 deaths. So those people are literally afraid. Yeah. And that's a huge problem worldwide.
It's fascinating because also what's really fascinating is the fact that this whole Make America Healthy Again movement that's happening is kind of sort of saying no to vaccines and saying no to vaccines and trying to tell the world that, I mean, I don't know, that they're trying to make America healthier again. So yeah.
Incredible. But it's incredible that it is already incredible, this weird discussion about yes or no a vaccine. Let people want to vaccinate themselves, and those who won't, don't. Doesn't matter. But be aware of the fact that vaccines can help evolution. Be aware of that. Perhaps I would never ever repeat an RNA vaccine. That's another thing. But you cannot say that vaccines have not helped us. If we would not have developed a vaccine against polio would still damage a lot of persons worldwide. So I'm not a black white thinker. I only think in benefits and logic.
We will leave it there and just say a huge thank you for your generosity with your time and your thinking today. It's been a real pleasure talking to you. I've thoroughly enjoyed it, and my mind has been expanded and my purpose in this space renewed. So yeah, personally, thank you for that.
Thank you very much.